Hi all, my name is Jeff Hulett. I'm a decision confidence builder. I lead Personal Finance Reimagined, a decision-making and financial education platform. So all year long, we provide different months of curriculum, right? So we focus on different things, all to do with personal finance, whether it be buying a house, buying a car, setting up your retirement account, taxes, insurance, and other personal financy sort of things. But also we focus on life events that have significant financial impact. Like, for example, how do you get ROI out of your college decision? Or how do you know when to change to a new job? So what you'll notice about each one of these different monthly items is they're all connected by one thing. That is decision making. So the core thing that goes across everything we do at Personal Finance Reimagined is how to help people create a consistent, repeatable decision process for a lifetime of wealth and health. So this month is no different, and we're near the end of the year. So the really cool thing we do this month is we focus on what's called the investment barbell strategy. And this is where we kind of step back and we look at our wealth broadly and how to think about allocating our wealth. Okay, and this is what we call the investment barbell strategy. We focus on three main points of interest or characteristics when we think about managing our wealth. Those three things are volatility risk, diversification, and the very all-important time. So those three elements are critical when we think about how to create those quadrants, how to manage them, etc. So all month long, we're going to be very, very focused on building that out as a part of really as an overview for the rest of the year. So anyway, with all that said, I am super excited to have Paul Bennett join us today for on Personal Finance Reimagined. So Paul is the CEO and founder of DecisionMap Wealth Management, a leading expert in wealth management and the author of the Money Navigator, the essential guide to living your ideal financial life. Paul has a deep understanding of investor behavior and simplifying complex financial concepts to help clients achieve their financial goals. So welcome, Paul. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it. And hey, there's a common thread woven through our organizations. Personal Finance Reimagined is all about sound decision making. And as you can probably imagine, DecisionMap is very similar in the fact that we want to help clients and help guide them in navigating difficult decisions and create a process around that. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you, Paul. And I want to mention too, I've been really looking forward to this interview, and for a number of different reasons, by the way. I mean, Paul and I have known each other for about 20 years. Our kids know each other. I think I've coached your son. But we're in the same business. But there's one thing in particular that jumps out at me, and that is behavioral economics. Paul is an economist. He's a Ph.D., has degrees in behavioral economics. I'm the same way in that way. So we have a real common thread there in that behavioral sciences, cognitive sciences, and how they apply to our work. And so I have to admit, I'm going to geek out here a little bit, Paul, because I know I'm with the right guy to do that. So let me go ahead and jump right in and just and ask a question. So, let's start with managing risk and growth. Okay, so many investors struggle with balancing risk and growth in their portfolios. Now, how do you guide clients to make decisions that align with their goals while managing their trade-offs?
Yeah, I mean, again, common thread, the investment barbell strategy, I think does a lot of that as well in spades. The way that we help clients with diversification is essentially, building out certain asset classes within equities that could be, medium risk or really high risk or low risk in that area, that asset class area, but also on the fixed income or bond and cash side, we'll do similar things. But I think something that's really important that we add in is what we call alternative investments. So these are things that I like to say provide portfolio buoyancy, or the proverbial zig if the markets decide to zag. So these are instruments like private real estate, private equity, private credit facilities, things like that, that don't move with the ebb and flow of the stock markets or bond markets. So that would really help a client get a smoother overall return with potentially less volatility along the way.
Okay. Well, let me ask maybe a little different question. So and I'm thinking going back to like the behavioral side of it. So what I just heard you say makes all the sense in the world, and that's reaching a part of my brain, this sort of the cognitive part of my brain that's sort of calm and going, oh yeah, Paul, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
But let's now take, and I'm sure your clients are smart people, they're smart enough, they're working with you, but they've had a life of value creation, and so they're clearly smart people. But what I'm wondering about is, what about when the proverbial shit hits the fan and their market and their portfolio is tanking, as happens sometimes, like when the pandemic hit? I'm thinking even back to the financial crisis. It's one thing, and what I've come to appreciate, it's one thing to have that plan and sort of that cognitive side, oh yeah, this is really rational, let's do this, and then the emotional side of, oh my God,
right.
what the frick?
Yeah.
How do you manage that? How do you keep your clients focused?
First of all, we're all human, so we're not rational thinkers more than half the time.
Right.
And I love what you were referring to with that, that amygdala shock, the neuroscience where our amygdala and our brain gets this, oh my God, what's going on? Well, in 12 milliseconds, that happens when a stimulus hits the brain, 12 milliseconds, and it's emotional first. Right. That's the thing that's kind of crazy. It's emotional. 40 milliseconds in is when your cognitive brain starts to process and do what you were saying. Oh yeah, this is how these things really are. And you start to rationalize a little bit. But think about that. That's 3.5 times the time it takes you to get to that. Now, granted, it's within a second, but it's super fast. Why is that so? Well, it goes back to when, we were cavemen. Right. And the saber-toothed tiger's around the corner.
Right.
Would you rather have 40 milliseconds or 12?
Right.
Okay.
It's like, let me calculate my angle of descent of running from the lion or having it eaten.
Right. Exactly.
I think I'll run.
But here's what happens now. I'm going down to the mailbox, or I'm getting a statement in my email, and I go to the mailbox, get my financial statement for the month from my brokerage statement. And it dropped, and I go, oh crap! What am I going to do? I got to sell. This isn't working right.
Right.
You have to. Here's what we call it. We call it the 4 R's. Okay. So the first thing you need to do is you need to understand that you need to recognize. That's the first R. That there's something.
I thought you were going to say relax.
Relax, man. That's good. I like that.
Maybe the 5th R. Right?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So the first R is recognize that there's something going on here and paying attention to that amygdala shock, that 12 millisecond, 40 millisecond thing. And you don't need to get all neuroscience-y, but the issue is something's going on. Next thing we want to do is we want to reflect. So we want to just kind of say, okay, what's going on? What are the different options here? What are my own personal biases that are affecting what's going on here? They call those things heuristics, right? These how we view the world, things like that. Or shortcuts, mental shortcuts. Okay, so now we're at reflect. What do we do then? Well, we haven't done anything yet except we want to now reframe. So we want to reframe what's going on, like, okay, so really here's my 4 choices given what's going on. I don't just have one. I don't have to freak out and sell all my stocks. I can call my advisor. I can do some more research. I can, whatever. There's multiple things that you could do. What's the last one? Is it react? No, It's not react, and that's important because if it was react, we would be reacting to outside stimuli and just making silly moves. It's respond. So respond, we're actually cogitating more, we're thinking through things, then we come back and we respond to the situation as opposed to freaking out.
Right.
And you just kind of run through that, wash, rinse, repeat. The 4 R's, and then you relax on the 5th R, like Jeff said. It's perfect.
Well, what about talk a little bit about a real client discussion? I'm imagining, do you have clients that call you in I'll call it in the react mode, which is not one of the R's, but they are they're in that emotional amygdala stimulated state, and
Yeah.
they are reacting. Like I'm imagining you're part science, part psychologist.
Yeah.
Right. The
Well,
science of
Yep.
setting up and the game plan and the financial side of what you do, but also the psychology. How do you talk them down? How do you get them from react to respond?
I'm also a marriage counselor, priest, rabbi, psychiatrist, all those things as well. You're spot on. Yeah, so what we need to do is we just do another R. We need to remind them of that 4R process and just kind of walk it
Right.
back and let them know, hey, we don't need to get FOMO'd into something, right? Fear of missing out, obviously. We're not going to do that. So let's walk through those 4Rs again. Let's get back to center, right? And then here's the most important thing. At the core of every relationship, we have a comprehensive financial plan that is the foundational element built on a solid foundation, so that we don't have issues pop up where we're venturing way off quote unquote campus. Okay, so what we do is we want to make sure that our actions going forward are aligning with our goals in our plan. Now, goals in the plan could be educating the kids for college, being very specific about a university. They all want to go to Vanderbilt, or they want to go to JMU or University of Florida, 2 great schools. Right?
There you go.
Yeah, so those types of things, you get back to center on the goals, and then if they're doing something that is not congruent with that, so actions are not aligning with goals, then we say, okay, has something changed?
Right.
Because that, look, something could have changed,
Yeah.
and they could have, so we readjust, and but we always come back to the plan as the core.
Right.
As the core.
Well, tell me a little bit about that, because I could imagine, do you ever have a situation, I'm imagining part of what you do is training your clients around what you just said. We've got a game plan, and this game plan is not, executing against the game plan isn't about when everything's going well.
Right.
This game plan is here to hold us accountable for when the shit hits the fan, right? Yep. And so that's what, but how does it ever happen that you just have clients that say, hey, Paul, I hear you.
Yeah. I
don't care, sell it all.
Of course.
And now how, what does that do to your relationship? And does that, how do you handle that?
Yeah, I think in some cases we have to, push back firmly, because what I tell clients is, look, I'm not here to be your friend, but I very often am, friends with a lot of my clients, but that's not why I'm here. You've hired me to be what? The arbiter of truth. So sometimes it's painful, and what I like to call lifeboat drills are done in advance. So funny kind of sidebar here.
Right.
This is pretty funny, actually.
Okay.
Because the person involved. So no names mentioned here, but my wife and I went on a cruise with our kids, and this was in Norway. It was a really fun cruise. I'd highly recommend it. But anyway, we're traveling from Southampton, London, and we're headed up the North Sea to go to the first fjords and do our thing, right? So as we're headed up, this is the first day on the cruise, we all have to go to the muster station. And anybody who's been on a cruise knows what I'm talking about. This is the proverbial lifeboat drill that you do. And you go to one part of the ship is where you're supposed to congregate in the event of an emergency or something, right? So we go there, we have our life jackets with us like we were told to do, the whole 9 yards, and we're told how to do everything. Great, okay. That night, it's like 6 hours later, we're asleep, it's 2 a.m, worst seas ever hit. True story. I open my eyes and I look across the bed and I see my wife wearing her life jacket at 2 a.m.
She was well mustarded.
Anyway, my point is lifeboat drills are key with clients to make sure that they understand, okay, this is not always going to be smooth sailing. There are going to be some rough seas, and this is how we deal with the rogue waves and etc.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of making almost like emotional preparation. So it's like, and it's hard because simulating emotion's a lot harder than living it, right? But perhaps the closer you can get, the more you'll be like, oh, we've talked about this. We sort of had a drill. Okay, I get it now.
Yeah. This is what you were talking about.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's a couple times.
That's amazing. Well, let me shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit about strategic investment approaches. Now, I kicked off talking a little bit about investment barbell strategy and sort of diversification, volatility, and time as kind of being our pillars. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you help clients approach this balance with their investment strategies?
Yeah, I think it's on the upfront side, it's a lot of discovery. So there's a lot of front end gamification, quite frankly, that we use with our clients, where we are having them do quizzes about how they would react to certain situations.
Right.
And then we help them determine what their number one money personality is.
Right.
So they're either very, we find there's three primary money personalities. One would be someone who's really commitment focused, right. Whether to, their family or just, a certain
lifestyle.
Maybe. Yeah, lifestyle. Next would be more protection focused, really worried about potentially the other side of the coin losing money and really, kind of hunkering down. And then the last one would be somebody who's really concerned about charitable giving. One more, happiness focused. Okay. This is the person who's on vacation, scheduling the next one already. Right. Now, what you find interesting in that is if you have a money personality that is protectionist, married to or has a significant other that is a happiness focused,
Oops.
how does those conversations work? Right. So that's where I have to sometimes come in.
Right.
And I'm the meat and the sandwich there, talking to both sides of the sandwich and trying to figure out what we're going to do. And a lot of times it's trade-offs. Okay. It's trade-offs between the two partners in a relationship. So that's key, is figuring out money personality. And then we also go deeper than that.
Right.
And we have values discussions, and we have an exercise we put clients through. Sounds like rigorous. It's not. It's actually fun. But clients go through this with us, and then it helps us determine what they value. And we end up with their top 5 values. These could be things like, well, the number one value that we find come out is more qualitative.
Right.
It's not quantitative. It's spending more time with people I care about.
Right.
That's why we're here on this earth, for most people. Creating a lasting legacy is a big one. Charitable causes, etc. So you get the point. So there's 5. And then we always go back to what we said earlier. We want to make sure what we're doing is in alignment with our value system.
Right.
So then we start investing based on that value system.
Right.
Very similar to IBS, what you guys are doing.
Right.
I mean, it's a similar type of situation. Okay. So we want to seek out higher returns, but we also want to do that on a risk-adjusted basis.
Right.
Yeah. And bringing in those alts like I talked about.
Yeah. No, that's that. Oh, I love that. That's really interesting. Now, one question I have is like, so I can imagine just discovering what's important to me is hard enough. And then it's often a husband and a wife or 2 partners, whatever. So then it becomes what's important to me you change pronouns from me to us, what's important to us. And like you just said, those 4 or 5 different value segments are often very different between the us, right? And so you it sounds like you do a set of trade-offs where you're kind of, it almost sounds like you're just finding a good middle where you can achieve some of the goals that help each partner. But what I'm wondering about is, over time, how sturdy are those value decisions? In other words, do you see people morph as they age, or how often do you put them back through this to see if, like, oh, we used to be 1 and 3 and now we're actually moving more towards 2 and 5. I don't know, but do you see what I mean? Like, does that happen?
Totally, because you're going through these different life stages. Right. And you're graduating out of one chapter to another, and your priorities change. Your values are probably still there, but maybe the ones that are really resonating for you now might have switched.
Okay.
So maybe you did the charitable remainder trust that endowed something that you were really into, and now you've moved on to, I don't know, something else that's really important to you about your family, closer proximity.
For the legacy thing.
For the legacy piece.
The dash.
Right. Yeah.
What are they going to remember about my dash? Kind of.
Yeah. No, exactly. It does change. And how do we capture that? Well, we let clients drive the review process after the first year. So in the first year, we like to meet quarterly because there's a lot going on with the plan. We're building out the risk management piece. We're building out estate planning.
Right.
We're addressing tax issues, investment issues, retirement, all business, all these things.
Right.
But as we start to get our sea legs with the client and the client gets more comfortable with our process, we may meet still quarterly, or we may meet semi-annually, annually, but we will always go back to the plan,
right,
and we'll update that plan, which does address the whole value chain like we talked about. So it's a great question because they do change, no question about it.
So, it sounds like, I kicked off a little bit talking about the investment barbell strategy and then what you guys are doing. It does sound incredibly consistent. The one thing that I want to explore with you, honestly, but I think while they're similar, there are some differences in the approach to how Personal Finance Reimagined approaches the market. So for me, for Personal Finance Reimagined, I came to this mainly because what I figured out was the massive middle, which if you look at like income distributions and wealth distributions in the United States, there's this sort of middle group of people that's just getting wider that aren't quite wealthy enough to attract the interest of a wealth manager, but are high potential just the same, right? And so my whole thing is, how do I create a capability that's sort of cost effective, right, that works economically, that I can put out in the market to help people. The way I look at it for what I do is I'm trying to put myself out of a job, right? In other words, if I'm doing my job right, at some point they're going to have AUM north of $1 million or 2 million or 5 million or whatever it is, and then the wealth managers are going to get really interested, right? So I'm really trying to work myself out of a job in that way. But what I'm curious about is, how do you think about, like, I'm and this is what I want to test a little bit. I'm assuming most of your clients are the ones that have reached a level of success to be able to sort of fit within the DecisionMap framework. How do you think about like their children, or maybe even others that aren't quite at the AUM level that you would normally want, but maybe you'd want to help anyway?
Yeah, two answers on that. We're multi-generational focused, so it's very common for us to work with our clients' children, sometimes their parents, grandchildren. I'll tell you a story about that in a second, about a quadruple generational thing that we had, which is fascinating.
Great grandchildren.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But no, so we want to have strong financial literacy taught to the younger generation, and it is very common for us to have referrals from our clients to their kids, and usually adult kids.
Right.
Now, and I'm talking, just post-college or maybe even in college sometimes, I would say. But we work with them just like we work with the parents, no different. And the other thing that we do is we household the relationship, so the fees are then reasonable for the younger generation.
I got it.
On that front.
So you kind of pass it a little bit.
That
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, but I mean, for certain folks, we probably aren't a good solution. What we tend to gravitate towards are, I guess, I would call these folks participative delegators.
Okay.
So our clients majoritively are like really good at what they do, whatever their chosen field of endeavor is. Whether they're a lawyer or a doctor or a business owner or who the heck knows, a government employee, but they're really good at it. But because of that, they understand and value, and they think, I hope, that we're pretty good at what we do and how professional we are. So they want to delegate the financial side to us. We gladly accept that, but they don't go away. It's not just, take care of this and see you once a year. They want to participate. So that's why we call them participative delegators. Got it. And that's, and I think their kids end up kind of becoming similar. And but I'll tell you the 4-generation story, but if we have time. Okay. Yeah.
Well, so that's really cool, because I've seen statistics, and maybe I'm misinterpreting them, but I think the statistics say that the biggest time of attrition from a wealth manager is at a generational event.
No
so
question.
the parents, somebody passes
100%
away,
correct.
the money passes to the children, and the children are like, we're out,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Who's
so,
Paul?
but
Who's Paul?
yeah, right.
That's what happens most of the time.
But it sounds like you're being very proactive. You're investing in their children and basically developing a multi-generational. And I would imagine, we're white-haired, 50, 60-year-old types. You probably have younger people in your organization, perhaps.
Blonde hair, dark hair.
Well, they're a little bit younger.
Much younger than us.
Perhaps would identify a little bit more with the children. Because, it's like, oh, well, you can talk to me or you can talk to somebody who looks and sounds and talks like you.
What's super cool about what you just described is the younger gen in the office then gets to start to develop their own client base through that mechanism. It's phenomenal.
Right.
It's great.
In developing their skills. It's like an interning and skills development from the master to
OJT, on the job training.
Yeah, no, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit to your book, The Money Navigator, which has been sitting right here.
Next to another great book, too.
Yeah, right. I love it. Thank you. But if I'm thinking about today's environment, we just changed administrations. Some people were shocked by that or whatever, but we've changed administrations. Relatively high inflation rate compared, certainly mortgage rates are at generational highs. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was younger, they're still a lot lower than they used to be, but for a generation of people, they're shockingly high, right? But how would the Money Navigator, talk a little bit about, are there any things that, like a key takeaway that would resonate with most investors that you would pull out of your book to address today's environment?
That's a good question. I would say maybe, I think hiring somebody or working with a firm to help you is probably the key thing. And it's going to depend upon life stage and what proclivities you have and what you value. Whether it's a personal finance reimagined type of situation, or a robo, or working with someone like us, or working with maybe a larger, firm like a Schwab or something, just to throw a name out there.
Right.
But get started. I think getting a professional in your corner is key. I'm a big believer in working with a fiduciary. I think it's critical because you want to make sure that person or firm has your best interests at all times by law. That's critical. So not to knock anybody that doesn't have that, because they're in their own regulatory regime, but I think it's important to have a fiduciary in your corner. And a fiduciary is someone who's bound to act in your best interests. Right. And that's key. You need an unbiased professional. That's what the Money Navigator is. It's actually a person.
Oh, okay.
Or persons. It could
right.
Any
so it's the book version of this is what your fiduciary could do to help you.
I think so. Nice. That's fair. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask, you mentioned the word robo-advisor, and I'm just curious, more like putting on your wealth manager industry hat. I tend to think, and this is me, and I want to test it, I tend to think of robo-advisors as kind of complementary to a set of tools a wealth manager might work with their clients on. Like there's a place for the robo and sort of a portfolio of stuff that they do, and especially for the younger folks that probably have a higher expectation of using smartphone tools versus always relying on the human touch. But I'm curious, does the wealth manager consider the robos complementary, or do they consider them as competition?
For me, it would be the latter. Complementary.
Complementary.
Okay. And the reason being is, I have a good example. We have a client that's they're in their 30s, and this person sold his company and did phenomenally well and had a windfall. And the way he's decided to allocate is, we're the planners for him. We're doing all the heavy lifting on all the, multi-generational trusts and all kinds of estate planning things and tax issues. But we're also doing the bulk of the investing for him as well. However, there are a couple of what I would call sleeves
Right.
that he is allocated to two robos that you would be familiar with the names.
Okay.
Because he felt that it just made sense and there was no real value add
Right.
to go the other way and pay the fee on that. And we completely bifurcate that and don't obviously charge for something we're not managing on, but we're advising on that for him.
Right.
You bet.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so I think there can be a complementary.
Yeah. And I've always wondered how, like, the industry in general, because I've been in other businesses where it's like new technology feels like a competitor.
Yeah.
And then at some point, because there's so much sort of acceptance from the demand side, from your client side, that it sort of almost drags you into this sort of relationship with something that felt competitive at first, but now it's like, you know what, it's sort of like, it's the game I've got to play. And I don't know if that's going on in the industry. I mean, it doesn't sound like it is with you guys, but
yeah, I think we're a little bit forward thinking in how we do things. I'd like to think that. But yeah, I mean, with the robos, I think again, there's a real place. Okay. I think the sense. One area where I think there's a potential deficiency is on the planning side of the robos, but that's not really how I see robos being utilized to their top, use. Because there could be some context that's missed when it's done without a human really directly there, you know. Because how does one know that, I mean, just for example, that the client has a daughter or a son that's a special needs child, and really we should be probably setting up a special needs trust like now.
Right. And the robo's not going
to be able to pick that up. Yeah. The nuances like that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like maybe the way I look at it is you guys are like the quarterback that sees the big picture, whereas a robo is a tool.
Yeah.
And like if you think about it, like if you're building a deck and you pull out a hammer to screw in a nail or to screw in a screw, it ain't going to work very well. So part of it is, how do you know when to use the hammer and use it on a nail, not a screw? And that to me, it's like, the robos are great. They're going to, keep hammering. But if you try to do something with a screw, it's not going to work very well. Yeah. So it's like making sure that you know enough about the robo and the appropriate use of it, so you don't try to hammer in a screw or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay. Well, Paul, this has been really great, and I guess I wanted to start wrapping up. But I was just curious if you had any wrap up or advice, and also just thinking about your book, The Money Navigator and DecisionMap. How can folks learn more about you and your books and your firm?
Yeah, we're at DecisionMap.com, so quite simple to find us there. Know that you'll have the straight skinny if you reach out to us, and we don't charge for initial meetings. They're purely a fact-finding exercise for you and for us to see if there'd be a good fit. And we go from there. With respect to takeaways from the book, you can find the book on Amazon. You can find it on our website as well. I think the best part of the book for me is the whole section on, we got to it a little bit, but the section on just biases and I call them decision traps. So this is where you can maybe have a self-reflective moment when you read that section to say, oh gosh, yeah, I remember when I did that, or gosh, man, I did that too. And it's not to say, hey, you're busted. It's to say, hey, we're all human. We all do that kind of stuff. Right. It's natural, right? 12 milliseconds, 40 milliseconds. So anyway, thanks so much, Jeff.
Oh my God,
fantastic.
Thank you, Paul.
Appreciate it.
Wonderful to have you, and I hope to have you on our podcast again soon.
You bet.
All right, thank you.